You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's podcast. I am Josh Vietti, and this is Pastor Tom Touchstone, Pastor Ron Vietti. This is Vincent Sierra, and we're the OG crew of the Off the Mountain podcast. I say that, we've been doing it most of the time, but we do have a guest occasionally. And we've gotten into some pretty interesting topics over the past, man, it's been
24.
Episode 24, so
Yeah.
5 months.
5 months. Yeah. Wow. That's cool. Well, anyway, thank you guys for listening, and thank you for being a part of this. What we are doing this for is not for fame or fortune. It's not why we do this. We do this because we believe that conversations are important.
Yes.
And we believe that the right conversations are important, and we believe that those conversations can lead us all together as a community, and it can lead us together to be closer to God. And we believe in God. That's our whole spiel here. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you understand that we don't judge you for your beliefs wherever you are in your beliefs. We're it's not our job. We're not trying to change your opinion. We're just trying to share what we've learned.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to be uncomfortable when you listen to this broadcast. I hope we're not making you uncomfortable.
Right.
Like you say, we are Christian men, and we have Christian values. And we talk about subjects that some of them, have a lot to do with Christianity, some don't. And if you're watching today, you'll notice something very interesting. Josh over here is in a T-shirt. I've got 2 layers of clothing on. Vince is just 50-50. Tom's kind of got a T-shirt on or a long sleeve T-shirt. And so it's really cold on the mountain.
Yeah.
But some of these guys are hot-blooded, and they
I think it's extra layers of skin is what you want to say.
There you go.
Yeah,
I was trying not to say that.
yeah, no, it's okay.
I'm the littlest guy here, so.
Yeah.
I get it.
But anyway, we've been talking about some health subjects too. And I know last week we kind of really got off on health probably more than what we should have. But I want to mention one thing today because I've been having a lot of conversations with people lately. And one thing we've been conversing about, several of us, because I have a couple friends, 2 or 3 friends who have cancer. And we've been talking about fasting and this autophagy, they call it, process that starts when you fast over 24 hours. And what that process does is starts eliminating bad cells, damaged cells in your body.
Wow.
And then it starts regenerating brand new cells in their place. I was talking to some people this week that feel that they can be healed of cancer by implementing these fasts in their life. One guy I've been talking to said his doctor told him from LA that if you fast 3 days a week, that your body will be continually getting rid of these damaged cells, and it'll be replenish your body with new cells. And there have been some people that have claimed that they've been healed of cancer by this. So that's our health tip today. Well, it's a process that comes through. I think you have to probably fast at least 24 hours to get this process going. And again, I want to say we're not doctors, and if you're out there and have a health issue, you might want to talk to your doctor before you do fast.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, not everybody's in the position to do that. But it's funny because fasting is kind of a new trend, right? But it's kind of an ancient thing, isn't it?
Ancient. It's
It goes a way back. Well, the Bible was full of fasting.
It is. And so when we come and we talk to you guys about all these things, we've been talking about health. We believe in 3 facets of health. One is mental, one is physical, and one is spiritual. And we think that all 3 of those things, we believe that all 3 of those things work together to make the whole human healthy, right? And so today, kind of expanding on that idea, we're going to talk about the health of a community and what it's like to be a part of a community. I was going to say of a thriving community, but not all communities are thriving,
right?
And you're still a part of it. And so, how do you? Let me ask you guys this: how do you live in a community that you might see some dysfunctions or might see some disorganization? And what do you do? Do you stick with it? Do you leave? What do you do?
I honestly, I mean, as I've looked at the communities, I think what you're trying to do is doing something mutually beneficial for the community. And I think sometimes at stages of your life, you can belong to the community, and then there's times you would grow out of it. I think we all remember junior high and high school, and you think high school is a formative years, and you go to college and you get a new community. You know, I mean, you leave, what do we all say when we leave high school? We're never going to separate. We'll always be there. After the first year of college, you don't even talk to your high school friends
I
anymore.
have one of my old high school yearbooks still in my closet, and I occasionally will open it up and read the comments just for fun. You know?
Well, wait till you get to be my age. Someone the other day was sending class pictures of kindergarten where I went to school at.
Oh my gosh.
And it took me quite a while to find out which one was me.
Oh, man.
I wasn't real sure.
Right.
You just don't belong in that community anymore.
But you know, getting this thing really on fast track today, we all need to belong. And Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what does it state? It states that after the physiological and safety needs comes what? The need to belong and be loved.
Right.
And he saw that as one of the very important, either 5, 6, or 8, they've expanded this thing, needs that he had on his hierarchy. And in Genesis in the Bible, it says that it's not good for man to be alone. And of course, God made him a helper, gave him a purpose, and we've talked about some of that on the other podcasts. Paul McCartney's song, I love the one where it says, you know, all the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? So
And
we were
he-
not made to do life alone.
Right.
He wrote that in London, right? And
Right.
big city. They say that the big cities of the world are the loneliest places because everyone's busy doing their thing. And if you don't have a strong community in a city,
You get swallowed up.
you're watching everybody else.
Right.
It's
Right.
like that whole idea of, you know, Jesus talking about the wedding feast, and you know, some people are outside looking in, and it's just so sad, I think, when you find yourself in a place where you are alone because you haven't invested in something that's bigger than yourself.
Well, it's possible to also be in one of those big communities. You know, you go to something, but that doesn't mean you belong. You know, just because you're there, there's people around you, and maybe you show up and you do the thing, doesn't mean that you actually feel like you belong. Because you hear about these people that belong to these communities, and they end up doing something tragic, or they end up
That's a good
exiting.
point. In my book, Tribal Influence,
Right.
I give an illustration of a man who was a part of a golfing club. And in the book, I tell the story of how that he had a massive heart attack out in the golf course. And the guys he had golfed with all the time, they said, well, that's life. And they went right past him, and they all finished their game and just left him there with a blanket over him. And so he was a part of the golfing club there, but not really a part of it.
Right.
And so that's a good point you made. But, you know, our bodies even excrete something called oxytocin. And they call it the love drug or whatever. It's a hormone that's produced in our brain. And it produces warm and fuzzy feelings and produces some really good feelings in us when we both love others and are loved ourselves. And so our body is even geared to be healthier if we have community and we can show love to other people and, of course, receive their love. And again, I'm going back to my book, Tribal Influence. Studies have been done over the years about babies in orphanages, or not orphanages so much, but they're in institutions and hospitals where there's very limited human contact. And all those babies, they say, will get diseased and die early. And the basic thing that they need is love. And they've done a lot of experiments where they bring grandparents in, they bring people in to hold these babies, massage the babies, rock them. And they said it's tremendously amazing how those babies recover and live, the ones who have been touched and rocked, and the other ones die.
Well, there's studies shown that, and they do this now in the hospital. When you have a baby,
Oh, yeah.
Tyler, the guy behind the camera there, just recently had a baby, and what they do is they, as soon as the baby comes out, they bond. They keep the baby with
Yes.
the mother,
Yes.
and even sometimes the father.
But that's new because
It is new.
having 4 kids, I saw it 4 different ways, which is funny. But I told somebody when we first had our baby, they would take the baby
When you
from
first
me.
had your baby?
Well, when we first, Hannah had her first. Sorry.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but when so when Huntington was born,
Yeah.
the first thing that they did,
that was 16 years ago, 17. 16
yeah,
years
right,
ago?
so almost 16 years ago, they pulled him right from Hannah, and then they started cleaning him. So it wasn't immediate. Then when Lila was born, right? Fast forward 15 or 10 years. Then it was like they just threw the baby on her with all the stuff, and it was just I'm sitting there watching this going, oh, that's what they do now.
Yeah.
So
they took Josh away for 3 days. We didn't even see him.
Right.
That's his
crazy.
problem today. I'm just kidding.
I think that they switched. They switched me. I was supposed to be in that family.
I'd never heard this story.
right. Yeah.
My sister told me this. I don't know. Weird.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, and some of these experiments, and I my mind is having a hard time remembering all the details. But I know there was one little baby in one of these institutions that they said was dying, and it was going to die probably. And the janitor or somebody, I think it was a janitor, custodian, asked the institution if she could experiment with something. She strapped the baby in a backpack on her back all day long while she was working and sang to it, talked to it, reached back and touched it. And it was an amazing story. The baby recovered.
And
there's a lot of truth to this.
In a lot of cultures, they do that, right?
Yes.
In certain cultures, I think Africa, they keep the kid with them all the time. And those kids develop such a tight bond with their families, and they end up staying in the tribe that way, And I was thinking about it. I knew we were going to talk about this, and I looked up the word community in the Bible. I'll do word searches for fun. I have a Bible app, and I'll just put the word in, and the word community shows up one time in the Bible, one time in the NASB version of the Bible. Doesn't mean that there aren't other words that mean the same.
Because there's things that allude to community.
Yeah, for sure. There are other words, but that one word is something that we've kind of developed over the past, 100 years or whatever. It's a new developed word. There's I haven't done this yet, but there's a tool you can use online. It's called the Ngram Viewer. Have you heard of that? It's a Google tool, and you can punch in words, and it shows how the words how often the words were used in literature over the past 100, 200 years. And it's really interesting to see how things change.
Right.
But community is an interesting word. I was like, okay, well, if they didn't call in the Bible, if they didn't call them community so much, what did they call them? And I looked it up in Acts, the first chapter. And the first church, the very first church, the original church, they called them the brothers.
Right.
They didn't call them a community. They called them the brothers. And it was like, it was family, right? And that's what it was that's what it kind of has built out of. That's what a tribe is. A tribe is a group of families that.
Well, the church we were raised in, we were raised in the Pentecostal church. And I mean, it was everywhere. We all called one another brother and sister.
Yeah.
It was Sister Morgan, Brother Buchanan. I grew up to almost the age of 12 thinking that's what we were supposed to do.
I always thought it was a way to not forget people's names. Hey, brother, hey, sister.
No, you put their name to it,
Right.
Like we would have Sister Buchanan, Brother Travis. I mean, that was the language in the church.
Yeah.
Brother and sister.
I like that. I think that's something that, we're all part of a pretty large church. And what makes our church work, I think, is the fact that there are so many micro communities that create the large community. It would be very easy for someone to show up on Sunday at the Sunday event, right? And sit in a seat and never know anyone, never get involved.
And it happens.
Yeah. And so going to church, to me, is not indicative of being a part of a community, but it's the first step.
Okay, Josh, I meet people a lot. And I'll say, are you new to our church? Been there 8 years, 7 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
It happens all the time because you can slip in a big church and slip out without being noticed.
I see church services as the introduction. It's like, that's where you go to meet the people that you're going to do community with. And Pastor Tom has done a really good job at this. Tom, what have you seen over the years? How much and how important is it for people to get involved in community? How much does it actually impact their lives on a basic level?
Well, I'll take it back for me, and I always think we apply things on how they've affected us. I remember when I left Bakersfield when I was 18 years old and moved to Inglewood. And I remember the first week how long it was because I wasn't connected. But I remember after that being invited to Gold's Gym Venice. And I still wasn't connected, but a guy in the apartment complex I lived in Inglewood said, hey, want to go to the gym with me? And I'm like, yeah. I was thriving. I was craving connection. That was I remember that first week was the longest, and I don't remember the next 10 years.
Wow.
Because being part of a community, then they adopted me in. And so what I see as community with the church is that that's the beginning. And I remember how it got small for me and how it impacted me. So then I started doing it. My community, once I came to church, was Doug Loman, having tea for a year and iced tea. So that's what I do now. I try to bring somebody in just to a one-on-one community and then move them into the next, because I think it's a natural growth point. We all talk about mindset. We all talk about growth focus. And I think what it is, it's a culture. So you bring them in, and a lot of people will gravitate to me because they like to work out or something around that form. You know, and I think people do gravitate to people. And then I think as you get them in, that's where people start to realize it's real.
Well, let's take off on that line for a little bit more time here. You talked about the word community. Tribe would be another maybe synonym for that. And I'll refer to my book 2 or 3 times, Tribal Influence, today. And if you buy it today, I'll throw in a crock pot or something if you want to buy it. But
He's joking. by the way.
the definition of a tribe,
My favorite.
I'll give it a working definition of a tribe, is a group of people who have a common interest or common cause. And they can identify themselves with things like a name or color or ethnicity or a slogan or a mission statement. I can say a lot about this. We have, I have so much to say. We have so many different tribes out there today. For example, sports. Now we're moving into basketball season.
Right.
And I know football season is real big. Everybody has their colors. They're almost like a tribe.
Right.
You know, they'll wear their colors to the game. They'll have, maybe little flags on their car. So we see it in sports. We see it in automobile clubs.
Right.
We see it in movements. And so let's talk a little bit about tribes. I mean, that's a good word for community.
Well, I think the human connection is so deep. Like, people want to be connected so bad. Like you said, that
We're
first
made
week
to
was so
connect.
we're made to connect.
We're made to
that
connect.
we come up with the craziest stuff to connect with one another. It's funny because, something that you would think would never have a group, there might be a group out there that they watch the spotted white bird of, North America, and then they create a group around it. And it's like, is it about that spotted white bird, or is it about that connection to one another?
Well, it's common interest that it's a spotted white bird, common sport.
Right, but they use that thing to bring them together. So whether it's mountain biking, it's a hobby. Like you said, one of these different tribes. It's just people are longing for that human connection, and I think they thoroughly enjoy the thing they do, but they thoroughly enjoy it doing it with people rather than doing it alone. And I think that's where a lot of these tribes and communities come from.
When you consider the word tribe, you think of the old school version of the word, and that was the tribe you were born into.
Right.
And you didn't have a choice. You lived with Uncle Leroy's over here,
Right.
Aunt Susan's over here, and you just live together, and everyone has a job, right? And you're kind of born into the job. These days, you choose which tribe you're a part of, and you choose which tribes you're not a part of. And a lot of us are part of multiple tribes, right? And we kind of go in and out. And so what's interesting about the word tribes is it's kind of been hijacked a little bit, and people have used it in a negative connotation in the last 10 years.
Right.
And they said, it brings in a toxicity because if you have one tribe, that means automatically you're going to fight the other tribe. But I think that all has to do with the culture of your tribe. There are some tribes that existed peacefully for years and years and years.
Right.
I'm so tired of this redefinition of some words.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
In fact, I only wrote the book Tribal Influence because you asked me to. And during that time era, it seemed like tribe was kind of a cool word that was going around.
But it's
and of
still-
course, it changed in time like every other word.
It's still a significant word. I think that this is the idea. You make a good point. There are certain people that are trying to change the narrative by changing definitions.
Right,
And so
right.
what happens is you have all these different, what does love mean? Well, love means that you are supportive of every single person in the world. You know what I mean? But that's not what love is. If somebody tries to walk into my house and shoot my family, I'm not supportive of that person.
Right.
It's very loving for me to protect my family.
Like the other
right?
day on the podcast, I was talking about how I got crop dusted. And you guys took a big gulp, and I go, what?
my
You mean to
kids-
tell me that word has been changed now?
My girls would laugh pretty hard if they heard that one. But
to the core of who we are, there was a documentary about Bakersfield that recently came out, and it's funny because if you're from Bakersfield, it was a common thing that everybody, whether you believe it or not, was like, oh yeah, this is about Bakersfield. So it was a vibe because it was about the place you were born or the place that you're from. And so it brought some communal aspect to that whole thing.
Yeah, and it was a terrible, view of our community. And
Sure, but I'm just saying the people in the community all gathered together, whether you're on the,
well,
and
we watched it and it kind of brought us
100%.
together a little bit. We're like,
Sure.
nah, man, like,
yes.
this is right, that's not right,
Right.
whatever. And so,
Right.
Well, it's so interesting. I talked to somebody who's very politically involved in our community who sits on the different aisle that I do, and she was offended as much as I was. Yeah. And so at the top level, we had a community in Bakersfield because we were both were proud of our community. We're both involved in our community, saying good things happen in our community.
You know, it's funny. You could have two people from two different political sides or spiritual. You could be at a Lakers game, and I could be sitting next to somebody that doesn't believe the same thing. But guess what? We're fist bumping, high fiving every time LeBron scores. Why? Because we found a common interest. And those
It is
things
interesting.
It is fun. You could have
you don't know anyone,
You
but
don't know
some guy.
anybody,
Yeah.
and you could be sitting next to, and everybody's spilling beer on each other. It's like, I'm cool with this. I don't know why, but we're all cool.
Because I like LeBron James.
Because
so I'm cool with you
because we're
spilling
all
beer on
so
me.
right, or the Lakers, or the Super Bowl was last week, and people were going
But
nuts.
dude,
and,
it goes the other way too. A couple years
Yes.
ago, my buddy and I got playoff tickets to the Dodger game, and we ended up in the
Visitor section.
No, the grandstands.
what do we call it? In outfield area.
Yeah.
So we were out there, and this one guy just kept drinking, and he was totally blasted, and he was just bad mouthing the home team, the Dodgers.
Oh, man.
And if you know anything about the Dodger Stadium and the crowd,
That's a
they
bad idea.
turned on him. But what I noticed is when they turned on this guy, they were like systematic about it.
Yep.
They didn't just yell at the guy; they got the guy in trouble. They got him kicked out. He was gone, dude. And I was like, "This
Well,
is."
what Vince said, you
this
can
is-
spill beer on somebody next to you. If they're rooting for the same team, it's cool.
It's cool.
But you let a
If they're
Dodger
not.
fan spill beer on a Giants fan
Yeah, it ain't happening.
in San Francisco and see what
It
happens.
ain't happening. Yeah.
It's not good.
And I want to talk about that in the end. I will come back to that about the unhealthy side. But let's stay on this
Here's something
theme right here.
that has been bothering me a lot lately. And it's something that goes back to when I first started focusing more on my own community, was how much I noticed that all these churches, when they got tribal, they would fight against each other or badmouth each other or say, we're good, they're bad. And that to me is the opposite of what the New Testament teaches. If you look at the beginning of the church in Acts, it says that Jesus comes and he says, hey, just stay here, guys, in this upper room. We've been in the room. It's a small room. Stay here, guys, and just wait. And what they did is it says that they continually devoted themselves to prayer and to the apostles' teaching, and with humility and with one mind, they did this. And they were all focused on the same purpose. And they were all focused on the coming of Christ, the coming of Jesus. And I think that a lot of churches, a lot of communities, a lot of religious organizations, or even clubs, they start off right with a good mentality, a good purpose, but then they become so inclusive that they forget.
And I want to talk about that. I had written a note down here today. We talked last week. I prepared a little bit. You guys said you don't. A couple of you didn't. Tom does, I think. But talking about the church world going back, I've been involved in this for decades. And we let disunity come in on such sometimes stupid, silly little things. For example, what name were you baptized in?
Right.
One segment says you have to be baptized in Jesus' name. The other one, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And we completely, remove ourselves from one another because of that issue. Speaking in tongues is something Pentecostal people do. It's something that others of us don't do. And we let that be a big divide. Music, some churches don't like music, some like music. And most of the things are trivial. And I think if we really concentrated on the one major thing that Christianity espouses, that being love, I think we would get over some of these things. But yeah, we're divided. The church world today, you have all these denominations. I believe in this, you don't, so I'm not going to have fellowship with you. And it's all ridiculous. It's absurd.
So
now,
how-
there are some doctrinal things that are important.
So there's two people that might be listening today to this, and it would be people that are part of a community and people that are leading a community.
Right.
And so first, let's talk to the people that are part of a community. Let's say that you are a part of a community and you see some issues and you see some discrepancies and you're frustrated. but you still feel like you need to be a part of that community. How do they handle that? What's the best thing they can do?
You have to look at the positives. And like we've said before, we use the phrase very often, eat the meat and throw away the bones.
Yeah.
So if you feel like you're still supposed to be a part of that community, really draw your attention to the positive things, and you're gonna have to let the negatives go or it'll drive you nuts. You know, Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survival, he says lack of meaning and boredom is caused when we don't have community, when we don't have people around us. You get a lack of meaning and boredom. And he says that lack of meaning and boredom that is caused by not being in community and not being close to others can lead to discouragement, mental problems, and depression. And so I think it's very, very, very important that we get into a community. And I want to take this a little probably on a wider scale than maybe you guys are going right now. I'm going to talk to people at some point about being involved in church, but it's even bigger than that. There might be some of our listeners who, are not religious, whatever. I mean, being in a car club can bring health to you.
Right.
Being in a hunting club, a fishing club. I mean, this goes far out of the boundaries even of Christianity.
Right.
And so, obviously, we're trying right now in our church to find out what people's hobbies are.
Just to connect people
so
together.
they can connect people, connect with them for both their spiritual health and their physical health.
Well, Josh, you talked about people that are in the community. They see some problems. It's not the best community. And I think that's one of the things that we lack to address, that people don't want to stay put because they think the grass is greener on the other side, right? They want to move away from that community. And sometimes that's the easiest thing, right? Maybe you see that the community is toxic and you want to move away because, but also I think it's really important to stay rooted in a community where there are some good things happening, because you can be the change that affects that community in a positive way. I mean, go back to even tribal, right? And this is really crazy. And that's why tribal kind of got a bad name, but I understand where it comes from. When you think about the word tribal, tribes had intertribal conflict, and you would have one chief, and you talk about this, would fight another, because there was something that needed to change because everybody wasn't happy. Maybe this one chief and this one tribe was ruling people and it wasn't right. And so there was an uprising and it caused, an issue to happen for good to happen. Sometimes not always good things happen in an uprising, but
They divide it.
They can break up, or that community is able to morph and change into something better. So if you're part of a bad community, it's funny, Simon Sinek writes this book called Better Together. And it's a really, really easy read. It's actually a picture book. It looks like it's made for kids, but the whole premise is about a bully on a playground. And so all these kids are basically being bullied on this playground. And they soon realize that in order to handle the bully, that none of them individually could stand up to the bully. But if they work together,
There you go.
then they will be able to make a change on that playground and be able to move forward away, basically get rid of all the conflict that the bully is causing on the playground. And that's a beautiful word picture, because you might be in a community where there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of good people around you, but you have to be able to work together to make change happen.
Well, some of the Indian tribes in my book, some of the tribes, were good at hunting. They knew things about hunting that no other tribe knew.
Yeah.
Others knew about building huts. They knew how to build huts better than anybody else, but they divided themselves. If they would have worked together, they could have learned from one another.
I have a good litmus test to put forth to see if you are in the right community or not.
Okay.
Because sometimes you need to leave. I believe that.
I would agree with you.
Right. I'm not saying you always have to stay but I think people do eject, especially in our culture, faster than they should, because and like we talked about last week, people don't want to tackle the hard stuff in order to see change. They think it's easier to move to the other, because from a distance, the next church, the next car club, the next thing might look more sparkly.
I'm going to argue that most community members of probably almost any type of community, unless it's like specifically the opposite, exist to not change. They don't want to change. They want it to become a club. They want it to be this familiar. They want it to be the same thing. And I'm not saying that's bad,
right?
But if you're
saying communities don't grow past the original.
It's a mindset.
Right.
Depending
on the leader.
It comes down to and I believe this more than anything.
Okay.
And I'm also kind of delving into this myself.
No, I like it.
It comes down to values.
Okay.
Are you
I
in
agree.
a community with shared values, or are you in a community with people that
That's huge.
have different values? Because if you value different things, then it may not ever work. And so you have to be in a community where you have the same values.
Let's go back to what we're doing right now at Valley Bible Fellowship. We're producing hopefully a lot of groups based around fishing, hunting, golfing, shopping, sewing,
And
board games.
those
whatever.
interests could be
But we all
argued
have
they're
the same values.
Yeah, yeah.
We all, because we're in the same church, our values are pretty set on the same level. You know.
Yeah,
We're-
and I think that if we're not testing that regularly, then there could be problems. But we test that regularly. I think in our church specifically, we will throw everything out on the table and we'll say, does this fit the values? Does this not? And if it doesn't, we'll let it go. We'll say, okay, it's not our thing anymore. We're not going to stress about that.
Well, let's go back to some of these groups we're forming. What we're encouraging people to do is, let's say that I have a horseback riding club, because that's my hobby.
Right.
Our club, let's call it a small group.
Okay.
That's what we call it in church. And so what we're going to do is base it around our values. So everybody who wants to ride horses, meet at the so-and-so stables on Saturday morning at 10. And when we get there, we're going to take maybe 15, 20 minutes and say, here's this morning's devotional. And here's the scripture we want to look at today. And let's pray for one another. So we think it's the perfect scenario, really. Of course, from our mindset, it would be, where we are forming these smaller communities around our value system. And that's around serving God in Christ.
Yeah.
And so I think it's something very healthy for the church.
Yes. So I think there's a core value. There are core values, which are the big things.
Right.
Right. And then there are smaller values.
Sure.
And that us in the same church will have different, like, small values, and then there's big values. The big values we should have the same,
Right.
But the small values could be different, and that's
Yes,
why the smaller group thing works. That's where the interest thing works.
well,
That's where, you know what I mean?
It's interesting that as you're saying this, and I'm just working it out with you, as my mind's moving 100 miles an hour. And I'm
This is
just
all
trying
kind of new stuff for me. So
No,
I
that's
haven't
okay.
even-
Because I do agree with what you're saying, that where your values are at, and then you're going to have to morph it. But I do have to go back to thinking about where you're, like, something brought you together. So if you're a part of a community, whether it was the small thing might have brought you together.
Mm-hmm.
At what point? No, let me just ask you. Let me just ask this. At what point do you eject? If the small thing brought you, say, let's just go back to the Lakers. The Lakers brought you together, right? You watch it with some friends. You guys don't all believe the same thing. You might not have the same core value, whatever,
Right.
core deep, but on the micro, the Lakers brought you together.
Right.
At what point do you eject out of that group because you're like, well, they don't have core they don't believe the same way I
Yeah.
do, because in your mind you might be like, this might be good because this is an opportunity for me.
Well, let me ask you this. So,
Okay.
for those of you guys that don't know, Vince and I are best friends. Been best friends since high school.
Sure.
You may realize that. You may not realize that based on how we talk to each other on this podcast.
Right.
But
Sometimes it's nice. Sometimes it's not.
what connected us? I mean, originally it was just funny things that we did.
It
in
was
high school.
micro. Yeah, it was micro.
Right.
I would say the micro connected us.
But
yeah.
then it was a view that we shared
Sure.
of the world that we lived in, I think.
Right.
And that's values,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
That's like core
Right.
values. And so, but then as we got older, we share a lot of like little values too. Like
Right.
we love adventure, motorcycle riding.
Right.
We love hanging out. We love
Right.
getting. So I did this. So there's a not to get too much in the weeds, Dad. And I don't want to take it off of what you're talking about.
No, I think
But-
it fits because you're
Well,
talking.
it
Because I
does.
think I
And I want to jump in here
Yeah,
because
go
I
ahead.
disagree with both of you.
Okay. No, I love it.
So let me just use your analogy.
This is when it gets
Okay.
interesting.
I'm going to use your analogy,
does.
and then I'm going to jump into something personal.
Okay.
So I don't think it starts as liking the Lakers. I think it starts as liking the basketball.
Interesting. Okay.
Because if you start liking basketball,
Okay.
then you're going to pick a favorite team.
Okay.
Then you're going to find a favorite player. Because there again, when you had Kobe Bryant,
Yeah.
you had Shaq.
Sure.
People didn't like Shaq or they didn't like Kobe.
100%, yeah.
So for me, I've always been in fitness. I've been in fitness all my life.
Okay.
52 years. I've always been in fitness as a heathen, and I've been in fitness as a believer.
Okay.
Fitness is something where I have community. My community within that community changed at one point. I used to powerlift, saw powerlifting, and I got into bodybuilding where powerlifters didn't like me because I wasn't still trying to lift weights. I was trying to form a body, but we still like nutrition. So today I still go to the gym. I have a community in the gym. I left the gym this morning, looked at a guy, and he goes, Tom, you going to Bible study? I go, I am. He goes, I'll see you there. Another guy heard me, and he wasn't going to Bible study with me, but he was still my community at the
Yeah.
gym.
Right.
And so I think communities, when you're in a community, you have a chance to influence
Yes.
the community you're in.
Right.
So a greater value of mine was influencing a bigger community
Yeah.
of mine. So as I left the fitness community because of their morals about being married didn't fit my new morals about, about commitment to one woman, I didn't leave the fitness. I just changed communities because I became into the Christian community. So I think you can have a big community and then stay in there and influence them.
Influence is huge,
for
yeah.
a morality method. But does that make sense? Because
Yeah,
so I still have Bible studies.
I will support that though.
But I still have Bible studies, and Pastor knows me
Yeah.
because I start a Bible study and I stay in it for a couple of years. But then I bounce because the
Right.
community has been built.
And but that's probably has to do with your calling a lot. Like you're kind of like you're what is it, apostleship kind of calling where you
Well,
start
it could
something
be.
and you move on,
It could be, but I also see values of community, of influence, but I also see it with showing reinforcement. I had a Bible study that met every Friday, and I had old guys in it and young guys in it, and then the pandemic hit, so we had to go virtual. And I had one of the old guys that ended up needing a triple bypass. So we can't connect. And he said, I need prayer because I'm going to get a triple bypass. We were as impactful in reinforcing that man then as we were ever. And so as he went and had a heart surgery, we couldn't go visit him. So I never forget the first time he zoomed in with this when he was in the hospital room after his bypass surgery. So he was part of a community. We used to be in person, then we went virtual, but all the guys were still connected with this guy, even though we couldn't be next to each other, touch each other, but we were reinforcing him with a common value that his life had meaning, that he still was part of our group,
Yeah.
that was there. So,
Absolutely.
Well, we've always said too that as Christians, God has to be number one in our life. But you can have a number two love, number three, number four.
Yeah.
Now, for example, I'll support what Tom said. I'm trying to like basketball right now. I'm a big sports fan. I like UFC fighting. I like baseball. I like football. I like almost anything on TV that has to do with sports except basketball. And I'm having this big gap in seasons right now. So I'm trying to like basketball, and I'm going to try to do that.
Best sport on the planet.
But once I establish and confirm that I'm going to like basketball, now I have to find a team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now I got to find a team that I can
Well,
support.
there's-
I know one thing, it won't be Los Angeles Lakers. It might be the Clippers.
There are a lot of
Not
guys.
the Lakers.
There are a lot of guys out there.
Do not be a
And-
Clippers fan.
And I don't want to discount the women fans out there either. But there are a lot of people out there who their friendships revolve around things like sports, or they revolve around
Right.
things like
They
just
do.
interests. But
and
again,
isn't that a community?
it's great, yeah. But Vince and I have a deeper type of friendship.
you do.
Where I could care less about basketball. It doesn't mean anything to me. But I'll go to a game with them because he likes it.
I
and
appreciate
it'll be
that,
fun
yes,
and
yeah.
whatever. But ultimately, like we have a deeper, we really want. We have these deeper values that we really believe in, that we do share. Like, I'll throw one out there. We want everyone to understand, that they belong to the community that we're in. That they have an open door to come into the community we're in,
Yes.
to be a part of it, whether they believe in what we believe in or not. And so that's a huge value. And so what I've learned, there's this professor out of. When I say I don't prepare for the podcast, I'm preparing for things all the time. I'm just constantly reading. But this professor's name's Shalom H. Schwartz. Look him up. He has this website where he talks about the theory of basic human values. And his theory is that there's like 57. I don't know how he came up with that number, but there's 57 specific values that directly affect our motivations in life. Okay. And so I'm kind of delving into this, taking the test, doing the thing. But what I learned about myself, I was telling Tom about this before, is my values are actually lower on hanging out and like in just being there in a community and just eating together.
Right.
But my values are more like adventure, fun, like going out and like doing something that other people might see and be interested in as well. Like I'm more of a maverick, like go out and have fun and just do stuff on my own, but then come back to the community. So like my values are a little bit different than somebody else's. And so I think yours are too. And you know what we all have in common here, where we might actually have a problem connecting with a lot of our listeners, is that we're all leaders as well.
Well,
Right.
we all in this table right here belong to a community, and sometimes we never connect that community, but we all believe in health, fitness,
We do.
And then I go to a different gym than you guys do.
Right.
Go to a different Pastor Ron and I used to run into each other.
I
once
talk
in a while.
about working out a lot.
Yes. So I'm just saying we belong to that community, so it connects us. We can have a conversation around it,
Right.
but then we don't have to be together in it. But we all benefit from it.
We all like sports. God is our number one priority.
Yeah.
We have a lot in common. But I want to go back to what you said, Josh. Let's say that all four of us go hunting this Saturday. We go on a hunting trip and we go out and we spend the whole day, come back. My wife says, "How was the hunting trip?" You know, the first thing that comes to my mind is not the deer we saw or the birds we saw. It's in the conversation on the way up,
did we
and the
have a
way
good
back.
time? Yeah.
That's where I'm going to have the most to talk about at.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I love about community is where you can support somebody's weakness and then they can support yours. You know, as I can be in a part of a small group and I'm sitting there and maybe one of my weaknesses is technology. But I'm sitting there
Oh,
where
it's huge.
I may have a strength where somebody can come and talk about fitness, but I need their help with technology.
Yeah.
You know, and so you can feed off of each other. And so it's mutually beneficial for us to be in the same
Is this
community.
a tribe right here?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's all
absolutely.
at the table. We're a small tribe.
We get
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
drive in a car up here, and
But
you
this
don't
is
be-
this is one of my tribes. So
I
it's
was
it is.
One of
I
many.
was sad
One of
that I
many.
missed a car ride with you guys today too, which
Yeah.
is funny because I was like, not that I like. This is my other tribe over here, my media guys, but you know, to be able to ride, like you said, riding up in the car with you guys, having the conversation on the
Yes.
way is so mean.
But let's
Yeah.
go on a little further on what Tom said. We're a little tribe. We have many tribes within the big tribe, which is God and the church. But if I have a tech problem, I'm going to Vince. If I have a workout problem, I'm going to Tom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if you have a health problem, you might come to me. We all, and Josh, we go to you on all
we
kinds
all
of
have
things.
we all have
One
different
thing-
strengths and different weaknesses.
And I think that's the beauty of a community.
Yep.
Well, that's a sign of a healthy community,
Yeah.
right? Being able to, if you're in a community and that community provides
Right.
support to, and you have, then you're able to.
And
yeah,
if
you're
you're
able to move
the
forward.
individual that comes and sits in the seat at church, but you never feel like you can get involved,
Right.
then you don't realize the strength that you're bringing to the table,
Well, you know,
right?
I
you
think
don't realize that you are bringing something unique.
Okay, Josh, right there. Let's stay on the same line. I tell people a lot, I say you need to be in a small group. Well, I don't need that because I have a healthy Christian life without it, but they need you.
Yes.
I know you. You have experience. You have wisdom. You're being selfish by not getting into a small community.
Well, you know, and I don't know if you ever see the value until all of a sudden it does give you a benefit, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm here for a reason.
Yeah.
But as communities develop, I think it's okay to say this isn't my cup of tea.
Yeah.
This isn't my. I've done so many small groups, and I know people have come to my small group and like, not it, you know. And but as they leave, I'm like going, well, I tell people, I go, hey, I'll see them at church or someplace out. I go, hey, why don't you try Hector's small group?
But our
Or what-
church is the same way. Our church isn't for everybody.
yeah. You have to be okay that maybe I'm not all that. Maybe all, but at least I'm impactful for the group that I'm
Do you
around.
see people come into our church doors and you go, they probably don't belong here?
Yes.
Right away. And one thing that might identify them, we love dressing down. And we love people. You can come in suits, you can dress up, and we think it's really cool. But a lot of people don't feel comfortable in that environment. Like I said, one day, our security team, I was walking across the grounds of our church, and I heard them on the radios going, we got a problem, we got a problem. What's that? A man with a suit on is following Pastor Ron. He's got a suit, a tie, everything. And they knew he was kind of out of place in our environment.
And I would notice that because they kind of stick out, but I would also wait and see. I'd be like, who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
Who knows? You know, if that
I think
person's
it's
gonna
cool.
fit in or not.
Sometimes people will come in a suit and I'll go, hey, bravo, man. We need to be able to do
You
that.
want to be able to identify differences because that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it might not be the thing that brings you together.
The
You know what I'm saying?
the large community that we're a part of at the church, it's very diverse, and it's not just diverse racially. It's diverse in class. It's diverse in opinions. It's diverse in ways of life. And so I love that because to me that's a rich environment.
We learn from one another.
A very weak and brittle environment is one where everyone looks the same.
Let me ask you a
says the
question,
same
Josh.
things, right?
And there's benefits and detriments, but what is one of the benefits of our church, VBF, over a small home church?
What is one of the benefits?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when you assemble together, and I think that can look a lot differently than the Sunday morning thing, or it could be Sunday mornings, it could be Friday nights, whatever. I think the assembly is important to get together and to basically get together with other tribes, right? I don't know if it has to happen every Sunday morning.
Well, and again, I think there's
I'm like-
there's benefits and detriments.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, when there's more of you, you can affect God's will in a bigger way sometimes because you have more resources.
I look at it like this.
You have
Like,
more
I look at it
resources.
like this. One of the
So there's
coolest,
good and bad.
One of the coolest things that I've seen is when churches from all over, especially youth camp churches, we get together, we go to camp, right? We go to camp and youth and we all get together. We all have different churches, different backgrounds, different tribes coming together. And one good leader is unifying everybody for that week. And it just does something to you, right? It's just something that's amazing.
Well, there again, as you go about that stuff, I think something that illustrates that is going to the Los Angeles Coliseum for a men's event, and you got hundreds of churches there, but you're going about being a better man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're willing to connect at the big level, saying, Christ has a purpose for us. I go to a special church because that's what feeds me, but I'm here today becoming a better man.
Let me clarify what I say, because I don't like to leave stuff up in the air. I'm saying a little group home church of 5 people. They will have more intimacy than us. And bravo, that's really
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
We will have more resources too. Because I know there's people out there who don't believe in the church, but the church at large, whether it's a small church or big church, when we pool our resources together, we can affect more stuff for the kingdom of God than you can by yourself as a loner. Now, going on that
Maybe.
well, yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, you look at Jesus, he had 12 dudes and they went around to each community,
but those 12 dudes were more powerful than one dude by himself.
they were. But you know what I'm saying? Like the 12 really had an effect on all the assemblies that they went to. And
Right.
they were the actual ones with the resources.
Well, I just got involved with this because St. Thomas, I didn't realize he went to India and China,
Right.
where they have churches in India and China over St. Thomas versus St. Peter's, because he was the guy that went there, but he really didn't have a big community inside the Jerusalem or the Galilean
So
place.
I'm in a place where, and the reason my dad's talking to me about this stuff is we've had a lot of, you guys don't hear the backside conversations, but we've had a lot of talks about where the future church is headed, what is happening in the church right now, what will it look like in the future. And the truth is, and I'm learning a lot from you, Dad, and I'm learning a lot from you, Tom, and I'm learning a lot from you, Vince. I'm learning,
I learned a lot from you, Josh.
well, I'm learning that I think that it's going to look a little different for everyone. I think that some are going to want the big thing, some are going to want the little thing, and
Culture changes.
it
Time
does.
changes
And so,
culture.
But the young people are
Right.
they're used to having so many options in their pocket, in their little supercomputer in their pocket, that I think they're going to continue to want that many options when it comes to their faith, and that's dangerous because
There are benefits in both.
yeah.
And again, I'm not downing small churches. I'm talking about
Right.
a house church where there's 4 people or whatever.
And I know-
I'm not talking about a
right.
small
I
church
think
of
it just
30 or 40.
depends. I think it depends on the house church. I mean, it could turn into
It has
into a little
benefits, but
club
I'm just
too.
saying,
Yeah.
right now, okay, for example, let's say a church of 100.
Mm-hmm.
If they do a +1 on Sunday, they got $100. You can do a lot more with $100 than a poor person by themselves can do
Yeah.
for the kingdom of God.
Sure, but
And
a
pooling our
small-
resources is what I'm trying to say is important.
a small group where there's 3 people and one of them is Albert Einstein and they all just really
Right.
help Albert Einstein with his emotional issues has impacted the world as well. So it's different for every single situation.
Every group has their purpose.
Yeah.
I'm just trying
right.
to say God never created us to be a loner. And there's many Christian people say, I can do this on my own.
Right.
I
They use it
did
as
not
an
create
excuse.
us
I
this way.
agree with
Yes.
that. And
Yes.
I think that that's where if there are any other church leaders listening to this, that's where our church is a large church. It's a mega church, right? We have multiple campuses. We have one large building, but the strength of our church is the small groups within the large church.
right.
I really believe that.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of times I'll see somebody that goes to Pastor Hector's group in church. We may sit in the same pew, but we're not sitting in the same seat at the same Bible study.
Right.
But it's where we gather back together. And I do agree with Pastor Ron, because then as everybody comes back together, we are more powerful together.
Yeah,
And I'll tell you this, I'm not singing songs at my small group, but I come into the big, and
Right.
I've got a band there that the church is able to afford, and they lead me in worship, and that's a whole other experience. So I think your small group gives an experience, but then church
Yeah, well,
brings
let
an
me
experience.
illustrate that a little bit. A lady came in some time ago in our church, and she was bringing young girls out of prostitution. And she had 4 or 5 girls, and she came, and something offended her at our church. She said, you know what, I don't need you guys. I'm going to do this myself. And I said, but you don't have the resources that a church has. And whether it be a church of 50 or 100, I really espouse small churches. I'm not against them at all. And I don't care what size of church we're talking about, 50, 100, 150 or whatever, or like ours, thousands. We have the resources to give those girls you don't have. We have trained counselors. We have employers that can give them a job. So I'm just trying to say that there are people out there say, I don't need the church. And I don't want to get off on that, but you do. The church, the group, the tribe, the community has advantages that you don't have as a loner.
Well, let me just say this to kind of put a cap on what you're saying. The original, I said that the word community was used one time, right?
Right.
It was used in the book of Job in the NASB, and if you have a different version, you could say no, it's more. But the NASB, the 2020 version, the word community is used one time in Job 35. And the meaning of that word means the back, the middle, the core. So it's like the most important thing that you have in life to give yourself to is this community that's lined up.
What do we
with
call
one
our
purpose.
church? Valley Bible Fellowship.
Yeah,
We don't call it Valley Bible Community. Fellowship's a better word. It's a more biblical word.
Or club or anything.
But I'm going to
else.
change this again. I'm the guy that kind of gives us direction here. Isn't today's culture, isn't it real easy in today's culture to become a loner and not need community? I mean, you've got your automatic garage door openers, you got your computer, you've got
easy to be
your iPhones.
It's easy to be a social loner, a social media loner, right?
Right.
Like you can constantly be on your phone. I've observed some kids lately, and you got teenagers, Vince, and if they have a phone, they're constantly like glued to it. It's like a habit, and they feel a sense of community. But it's different than sitting in front of somebody and talking to them and seeing their facial expressions and hearing their tone. My wife and I got into a little spat the other day. It's because I text something, and she assumed my tone was a certain way,
Right.
and because she's imagined me saying this, and so it caused a little thing. And then I had explained, no, that wasn't my tone. My tone was like this, and we
There's
are
a different
we're in a
emotion.
dangerous place. I would agree with you on that. And that's why I think that it is so important for us in our own communities to take responsibility for the family around us. There's that word oikos, which is the Greek word for family. I heard a sermon on it a long time ago where they talked about how, you might go to a big church, but ultimately God will form this like 8 to 10, this guy came up with this number, 8 to 10 people around you, 15 people. Vince and I, we have a strong community of friends. And that community has been everything to me. It's been huge to me. And that was birthed out of the large church. But I think that if one doesn't beget the other, then I think that that's a bummer. That's a huge problem.
Well, we'll talk about the friend that we all have that's in the hospital still to this day.
Yeah.
He has a family. I got a call from his brother. You got a text from him.
Yeah.
We told Pastor Ron because ultimately he's part of the church. But you go to the Bible study, help him with the Bible studies. That I see him once in a while doing things. Yeah. But as we're all together, we became more powerful and influential in his life.
It also depends on maturity of the believer. I think that the large assembly is probably something that like when I was young and really kind of figuring out what I was going to actually believe, the large assembly had more of an impact, right? And then eventually that stopped impacting me as much. I needed to get involved in the smaller. I needed to get involved because that's where I was going to go from one level to the next.
But a lot of the smallers are involved in the bigger.
Yeah, a lot.
That's designed that way.
But the way that the church is headed, the way culture is headed, for good or bad, better or worse, I don't know. The way culture is headed it's going to be smaller. It's going to be family homes and all this stuff because they will have the support. They'll say, "Well, I'm part of this church."
Well, still,
that's online.
I don't
I'm
want
part
you
of
to
that church
misread
that's
me.
online."
I'm not talking about unhealthiness of 10 or 15 people. That can be a church. That can be a community.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about a loner out there that's trying to do life alone. I'm telling you, the Bible never meant for us to do life
Well,
alone.
I
agree.
think COVID also accelerated that when people, when they went away and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to stop going to church," and they're like, "I'm going to watch online," and they're like, "I don't even need to go anymore." And you saw a lot of fallout from that. People trying to isolate, be alone, and they were, and then they realized they couldn't get it done on their own, and so they ended up with problems as they came back into their communities. We realized like, wow, you were dealing with this thing and you didn't even know it until you got back into the community. So the community is really a place of reflection too. If you're in a good community, you're able to bounce stuff off of each other. You're able to be able to look at one another in the face, like you said, Josh, and say, "Hey, something's not quite right." And I think that's the benefit of not,
some
like
people
you said,
out here
loaning
listening
out.
to us, they might be substituting church for the Elks Club, the Moose's Lodge, the Druids. I mean, you look around and a lot of people are involved in communities. We're associated a lot of it to church because that's what we're about.
Right.
But I want to really, before we leave today, and we don't have a lot of time left, I want to talk about our children. Our our kids they're being exposed to community living from kindergarten on up. I mean, you know, when they go to school, and Tom's wife's a principal, he would know this, but right away you're being plugged into different little communities. If you're a real smart kid, you're put in the honor roll kids club. If you have some athletic ability at school, then you're in the jock club, the athletic club. Some get into the music club, the choir club, the art club. And here's the thing that I want parents to know, that we have to be really, what's the word I want to use?
Proactive.
Intentional with our kids. Because knowing that there's this thing within sight of us that makes us want to be a part of a group. And so when we go to school, very often, kindergarten on up, and let's say that we're not blessed mentally and we're not in the honor roll club, and maybe I don't like music and I haven't been encouraged to play an instrument, I'm not athletic or whatever, very often there's and I'm going to use this word lightly, a misfit club. They can't fit in. And they might start their club about drugs and about the occult. Mm-hmm. And sometimes our kids are under such pressure because they say, I was made to want to be a part of something. I want to be included. I want to be noticed. I want people to want me. And sometimes by default, they get into these bad clubs of drugs and the occult and whatever. I'm saying to parents, we need to really look at our kids and be intentional and go, hey, you know, you're showing an act for music, a love for music. I'm going to really encourage you to learn to play a musical instrument. Or I see you're athletic. Or is this, you understand what I'm saying?
I think parents can't be, I call it passive parenting. You can't just let your kids decide what they're going to do anymore. And that sounds probably really strong-handed. Like, how dare you tell your kids what they can and can't say.
Guy.
Yeah, I know. but you're 100% right, and you're spot on. I think parents need to hear this. My kids would have never, you know what they would have said? Dad, we just want to stay home and play Xbox or video games upstairs. And they probably wouldn't have joined any club. But we've encouraged our kids from day one. I know, Tom, you're the same way, to join some sport or join some activity or something that involves community at the school, you know, whether they were good at it or not, and then make them see it through. Because that's one of the other things where the kid might join a sports program or a music program and say, well, I'm not good at that thing. You're going to see it through. You're going to see it through because it's not only is it important for you to grow and to go through a hard time, but it's also important for you to be there for your community. So I know my daughter won't mind me sharing this. I won't say her name, you know, but my daughter joined track. She's like, I want to join track. I want to run, you know, do the whole thing. And I said, yeah, okay, perfect. I'll run with you. We'll make it happen. And halfway through, she realized it's a lot of running.
It's
She's
running.
Like, and the track meets were optional, so they could run during school, and then they could show up to the track meets on Saturday. And the coach said, you know, it's optional, but we really want you there because you help the team. So, anyways, she got halfway through the season. She's like, Dad, I don't know if I want to go run this Saturday morning, you know. And part of me was like, I don't want to run Saturday morning either. But I said, babe, you got to wake up and you got to run. Well, they ended up winning. This isn't every story, but they ended up winning their city track champion because as a group, they all competitively run. But it was good for her to see that even though I didn't force, I shouldn't say force, because I encouraged her to keep going, that something good came out the other end.
There's a really good book that goes along with that. It's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. Have you read that?
I haven't read it. I'm going to write it down.
Well, it goes along with exactly what you're saying.
Okay.
It's saying the writer of this book, Grit, she says the worst thing we can do for our kids is to tell them that they're great, but they don't have to work for it. Right.
Right.
The best thing we can do for them is to put something difficult in their little lives, you know, as they grow, something that is age appropriate, something that they can focus on and they can get through, because that teaches them how to get through hard things in life later on. And so she talks about that exact thing. And there's another book. The title's funny, how not to raise a-holes, but it's a bad title, but it's a good book. And it talks about this idea of like, if your kid wants to do something and they sign up for it, make them finish it out. You know what I mean? Like, don't let them quit, because if they quit, then they're going to learn how to quit anything else. Right. And so, but then if they quit and they don't want to do it again, that's fine. Right. That's okay. And so we're trying to teach our kids to be tough, to do the things that they need to do. But at the same time, I'm not going to force my kid to stick with something for 5 years. That they
No,
don't wanna
right.
Do, you know
yeah,
what I
but
mean?
if they, like you said, if they see it out for a season, then it's like, hey, if you don't want to do it, but you have to let them.
And notice your
help them
kids.
see-
Notice
see-
where their
see it through.
strengths are. I mean, we got to be intentional about our parenting.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, say this probably happens out there. Your kid comes home and goes, Mommy, Daddy, we get to do musical instruments, and they're asking me what kind of instrument I like to play. And we say, shut up, we can't afford an instrument. We're not a music, we're an athletic family.
Right.
You just made a real big mistake right there.
Yeah.
I got to talk to a friend of mine, Ed Martinez. Let me give him a shout out because he's an international powerlifting champion. He had a big meet this weekend, and I talked to him, and I asked Ed, I go, Ed, what were some of the formative things that helped you overcome things as you've overcome things? I know he's got injuries had. He goes, when I was young, I was good at playing chess. And my dad played with me, and I beat my dad all the time. And one day he came in and he took my queen off the board. And he goes, what am I doing? He goes, you're going to learn to win without your queen. It handicapped him at 9 years old.
Right.
But he was focused. He was almost a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, his dad took the queen off the board, and he goes, "You're never going to get."
But
to
then
play
there's
the
a
queen."
balance with that too. Because
What
you
he
can't
said
be
he
too
learned.
hard, right?
Well, what he learned was there's more ways to do this than the way I was doing
Got
it.
it.
And I looked at Ed. Now Ed has applied that through his life with his powerlifting and transitioning through injuries, weight classes, masters, and things like that. And so as I look at him, he's one of my heroes because every time he just set some international records for masters and open. And I go, "Why do you do both still?" He goes, "Well, I figure if I'm doing one lift, I might as well count it for."
Okay, Josh, but
multiple
go back to what you said. You said, and you can be too hard on them.
Yeah.
But that goes back to our Christian belief that we train our children. We're told in Proverbs, train your children up in the way they ought to go. And if you look in the Hebrew and all the things that goes along with that verse, it means train your child up with each kid's proper bent kept in mind. Now, obviously, the guy Tom's talking about, he knew this kid was tough enough to take it. If he had a
don't know
little
if he
kid
did,
that
yeah.
wasn't tough, he probably wouldn't be able to do that. But he said, no, he can take this. He needs this challenge right now. So I know we're getting bad on time, but I want to say one other thing, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I want to bring up the downside of community living. One downside. And what we can't do is we can't allow our community connection groups to become a divisive, hate-fueled, narrow-minded, we're better than you movement. For example, some people out there are diehard Democrats and, they devalue the Republicans totally. There are some spiritual fanatics and, that, if you don't speak in tongues, do it my way. I devalue you. You're not good. Sports fanatics, what have we seen? The Dodger fans beat a guy into a coma that's a Giants fan in the parking lot.
Terrible.
In other words, we must let our love for human beings override our commitments to our groups.
That's good.
And I'm not so sure that always happens.
Right.
Even in the church world, I can fellowship with people who like to speak in tongues. I don't, but that's no problem. That's not a big issue. And so let me just kind of maybe, I don't know if we want to end on this note or not. I know we're getting out of time.
I want to say one more thing when you're done with
Okay.
this.
I would like to jump in too.
Okay. I think that maybe some of us, live with an unsettled fear that to accept someone of a different club or a different opinion or different value automatically means that we have to approve of their behavior or whatever they're doing. I think what I'm trying to say is we got to love one another as human beings and get into our clubs, get into our tribes, get into our different connection groups, but don't let them become more important than valuing humans from other clubs. What is I'm trying to say?
Right. Just
Right,
be,
that's
I
good.
mean, unified on one purpose. If you are pro-human and your club's pro-human,
Right.
then you're not going to be fighting. Competing is okay. That's part of life.
And
That's
razzing
fun.
one another.
It's a blast. I mean,
that's all fun.
I love playing baseball against another team and beating them. It's fun. But in the end, if there's somebody hurt on that team, I'm going to stop playing. I'm going to walk over there. We're going to teach the kids.
That's what you want. That's what I'm trying to
put
get
their
to.
hand. Isn't there something great when you see that on the field?
This is what I think is important about people in the community. And I loved Pastor Ron talking about that because I think that point has to fall back on the leader. The leader has to be able to lead that
Yes.
community
Yes.
and not let it get off track. Now, if you're a part of that community and you see that leader getting off track and you love this person, I think that's where you start to be an influence in each other's life, is you go to them and say, hey, I'm not sure that's right. And if it doesn't change, maybe that's not the community or the leader you want to be following.
Well, the church world, it comes to no surprise, and it's not something that's been hidden. A lot of the traditional church world has had a real thing against homosexuals and people in those groups they don't approve of. And if you come into our church tomorrow and say, hey, I just want you to, I'm here, I'm a homosexual person, what do you think of me? I'm not seeing you as a homosexual person. I'm seeing you, first of all, as a human being, a person that needs God, needs God's love. And we're in the same group there. We need God and we need his love. And so I'm just saying, a lot of these groups and these tribes we're talking about today in these small communities, if they're not careful, sometimes they come into a very divisive type
And then
thing,
get toxic and-
hate-filled,
yeah.
and they become very toxic.
There's something.
I'm stumbling on my words today. I
no,
want you
you're
to know
good. You're
I'm
solid.
not on caffeine
You're
today.
good, you're
So
good. You're also fasting, so that's not easy to do.
I'm
I
not
just
supposed
wanted
to
to.
tell anybody.
I just wanted to make a quick amendment on something I said
Okay.
for those parents that need to hear this. Yes, encourage your kids to stick with it. However, with kids, there's safety in mind first. So
Sure.
if your kid is in a position where they're being verbally abused or
Right.
worse, get them out of that situation as fast as possible. That's not a time to double down.
We're
I
not
just wanted
talking
to say
about we're
that.
not talking about harming people.
Right, and
yeah, don't stick with it if it
I
causes
know that seems
harm.
obvious, but
Right.
sometimes it's
No,
not.
that's good.
You know?
Well, I had to go talk with my daughter Taylor as a senior in high school, wanted to play soccer. I go, that's fine, but you got a scholarship to go to college. And if you get hurt, that could affect that. And I remember having to go down and talk to the coach. We all know the coach. And I saw Taylor fall and limp. And I walked down and I go, you know, her future lies in another sport besides this. And I'm pulling her out.
Yeah.
Because I saw her willing to put her body on the line
yeah.
for the coach's direction.
Safety is number one.
And I knew that she needed to go to college with a skill that she had.
But if your kid is in a safe and good environment, then encourage them to stick with it.
Let me end with this right here today. What do I get from being in a community? I get blessed. I get new ideas.
Yeah.
I get oxytocin in my body. I get encouragement. I get accountability. I get the sow and reap benefits. I get fellowship. There's so many good things that come from being involved in a community.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're in the church and you're saying, well, you know, I've been invited to get into a community, it's the Automobile Club, or it's, you know, whatever, it's the Eagles or the Elks, I don't know, whatever it is. But it's not church related. Should I still do that? Well, it depends. As long as it's not anti-church and it's not going to hurt your faith, maybe you need to get in that club to go out there and show people the love of Christ. That might be your calling. And so I'm just saying, even beyond the realms of religion and church, being connected to small groups and community has all kinds of healthy, good benefits.
Yeah.
And I think that's
But use
my
common
bottom
sense, right?
line. Use common sense.
That's what it comes down to.
That's
So.
it.
Anyway, we thank you guys for listening. I know we kind of got into the weeds a little bit. I think we had a good discussion.
It was good.
and I think that's important to have. And work through things. And I hope that you guys can do this as well in your community.
Eat
But,
the meat and throw away the bones.
Yeah, absolutely. I also believe in growth, and I think communities can grow just like people can. So we love you guys. Thank you
Yeah,
so
love
much
you guys.
for listening. Make sure to share and
Yeah.
let everyone know what you're listening
Like to hear from you.
All right.
Love you.
Thanks, guys.
Is rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane. And it's bubbling over like sweet champagne. You got your mama's sunshine. You got your daddy's rain. You got your mama's sunshine. You got your daddy's rain.